So let's start with San Francisco and Philadelphia. I thought, at least in the first half, it felt like your classic matchup of great teams. Playmakers, speed, strength, coaching, kind of the class of the NFC. But I do wonder if that emotional game with a lot of snaps for the Eagles defense last week against Buffalo, and that was one of the reasons I like San Francisco. At this time of the year, John, every day counts for rest. So the Niners get several days rest. The Eagles play an especially long game against Buffalo. Defense is on the field, and I think they looked absolutely worn down in the second half defensively. That was my take.
Yeah, I thought early on, I mean, that place, I've been to a lot of games there, was rocking, and the quarterback was a little shaky. The Eagles came ready to play, which was shocking. I thought it'd be the other way around. The Niners had talked a lot. Like you said, they had been off since Thanksgiving. I thought by about midway through that second quarter, the Niners were really leaning on them. You could tell that defensive line was gassed. The Eagles' defense isn't very good. I mean, their linebackers are decimated with injuries. They're on like their third string nickel corner. They had to trade for a safety. And the 49ers, from Ayuk to obviously Debo, who has been running his mouth for 9 months. And listen, I got no problem. In an individual sport, you're Conor McGregor, you're Tiger Woods, you're whatever, you run your mouth. Only you have to back it up. Debo can back it up. I was nervous. Some other guys on the team, the right tackle trying to block Reddick. It didn't matter. I mean, Debo dominated that game. Kittle was awesome. McCaffrey was flying around. They came ready to play. But most importantly, Colin, in solidarity with the quarterback, how about that MVP type performance from Brock Purdy after starting the game 0-4, where it's just, he looked shaky.
Yeah.
19 of 23 the rest of the game, and just throwing dots, keeping plays alive with his legs, keeping his eyes downfield. How about the run he had where he broke the tackle? I'm not saying the guy's the MVP, but if he's not in the discussion, we're all not watching football. He was brilliant today.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've said, let's contextualize it. Shanahan's a brilliant play caller, and the weapons are insane. I mean, literally, Kittle will be a Hall of Famer. Trent Williams a Hall of Famer. McCaffrey should be a Hall of Famer. And if Debo stays healthy for 4 more years, people will talk about him as a Hall of Famer. That's just on the offense. But I do believe that there are just certain throws that C.J. Stroud makes, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a franchise quarterback that Kenny Pickett can't make, right? And so there are throws. Purdy will make about 3 throws a game, and he'll let go of that puppy before the receiver breaks, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's a franchise. And for the record, I don't see Justin Fields make those. I don't see him as an anticipation thrower. So, and it's not a knock. I don't see Zach Wilson make those. A lot of this stuff is innate. And, years ago, Bill Parcells had a rule. No celebrity quarterbacks, which forget that now with NIL. They're going to be celebrities. Yeah. But I want 3 years of starting. And I remember when I really noticed this, I covered Akili Smith at Oregon, and I loved the way he threw the ball. But he was like a 1-year starter, and he went to the NFL, and he just did not have enough reps. He was overwhelmed. And it wasn't because he was a good kid. He could move. He had a hell of an arm. He had a baseball arm, but he just didn't have enough starts. And, the NFL's impatient. By year 2, like if you don't, they're not sitting around waiting for you as everybody's going to lose their job. I think a lot of this with Purdy is he came in high school, college. He had like 8 straight years of snaps. He's just fun. He is just cognitively ready to play football.
For sure. But I also think he's really good. I mean, he was the Arizona High School Player of the Year, really good recruiting base. In his second year starting, he was the second team all Big 12 guy behind Jalen Hurts. For the next 2 years, he was a first teamer. And he's come in on this team, and he's clearly better than anything Jimmy brought to the table. And Jimmy was pretty good, not the version we've seen these last couple years. The other thing is, wouldn't you say probably the best average arm quarterback over the last probably couple decades was like Drew Brees?
Yeah.
And listen, you were right on Baker Mayfield. I personally thought he could become that. Clearly, he never sniffed that. I actually think this guy has a lot of those traits in the pocket, but he also has, unlike Drew. Now, Drew was much more accomplished as a passer coming out of college, but this guy clearly is comfortable to go into an environment like that. Dreary day, Philly, and I get they were running out of gas, and the Niners were favored for a reason, but that kid was dominant, just in terms of accuracy. And what's the key if you're going to play with really good players? Put it on them, because they're like, well, they got a lot of yards after the catch. Well, he hits them in stride. The ball to McCaffrey down the middle, a couple balls to Debo, a couple balls to Kittle. And his athleticism, I think, his 10-yard split is pretty much the same time as Christian McCaffrey. So he's not Lamar Jackson or Cam Newton down the field as a runner. But, in those little bursts, he can keep plays alive a lot like Jalen, right? And that's an underestimated part of his game that has taken the Niners to a whole nother level. Now, once they pulled away, it was not a fair fight because the Eagles, like you said, ran out of gas. But I also think you see, like, even if the Eagles had gas, let's face it, the Niners are a little better, right? Yeah. Fully healthy. And the Eagles they're not getting healthy guys in the secondary. Like Bradbury and Slay are their corners. And the way they use their number one wide receiver in Debo is not like an A.J. Brown. They don't just put him out there and say, cover him. Darius Slay would like that with a receiver. They're moving them all around. They're using them like a running back. Ayuk's a very shifty in and out of cuts, a lot like Devontae Smith, why nobody can cover him. And then you got Kittle, who is just one of the most unique players in the league, to go on top of McCaffrey. So it's just a tough situation. It's a tough matchup for Philly.
Well, and here's the other thing. So we both I think we both felt strongly just on the extra time that this was really San Francisco's game. And you have these moments when Dallas went to San Francisco. San Francisco's the kind of team, the Eagles know it and the Cowboys know it. If you don't have your shit dialed in, you're in big trouble. They play downhill really fast. They're like Buffalo 3 years ago without the mistakes. You get all the avalanche, without the yard sale of skis flying everywhere. They're like a streamlined avalanche, and you just can't, and with all these weapons. But here's the one thing about Philadelphia I worry about is that Ferguson for the Cowboys now, Brandon Cooks are productive. CeeDee Lamb's a top 4 receiver in the league.
Yeah, big time.
Okay. And then you have Debo, Kittle, Brandon Ayuk's a special player. Even awesome. Jennings contributes. The Philly secondary is not getting better. Awful. They made a move at the trade deadline. It's bad. It's old. It's not getting better. Even Detroit, if you watch them today, because Goff usually has time because of that offensive line, and they run the ball really well. Jameson Williams now becoming more of a threat.
Yeah.
There's an argument to be made with Philly. Their weakness is a real problem because we both like Goff more than people now. Amon St. Brown. Laporte. He's an incredible rookie.
Jesus.
So all of a sudden you start looking at Philly and you're like, oh, they don't match up necessarily well with the top 3 teams in the NFC.
Well, their key is they did not have to win today after they won the last 2 weeks. Now they're going to have to win this upcoming week against Dallas, right? And it's an enormous game. Their formula is going to be the D-line has to be elite. I mean, it has to be unstoppable. And it can be. Today, they were clearly running on fumes. That's why, let's face it, today, through everything, I mean, McCarthy, I'm sure, feet up, eating a sandwich at home with a big smile on his face because he has the opportunity now at home. The Niners took care of business. The Niners now play Seattle. All of a sudden, if Dallas wins and the 49ers wins, the Eagles are kind of looking up. I'm with you. You've got to be able to – it's not like Ambry Thomas and Lenore or Richard Sherman and Darrelle Revis in their prime, but they're functional players. And the main difference between the Eagles and the Niners, because both of them have countless D linemen that every team would want, it's the linebackers. I mean, Fred Warner is a dominant player. Greenlaw, who got in a fight with Dom on the sideline, is probably the best number 2 linebacker. But even when those guys, there was a moment when Greenlaw got tossed and Fred's shoe came off, the Niners have 2 other backups who are solid. I mean, the Eagles linebackers are Kyle Shanahan this is why Debo and those guys were talking so much shit all week. They don't think that all those guys have a chance to handle their speed, their physicality.
And they don't.
And once they took a deep breath and just kind of handled the crowd and just kind of the wetness and just everything that the link brings, it was a rout. They just ran circles around them, and that's for sure. Now, their D linemen, if they play at an elite level, can just cause so much havoc, and their offense has to be awesome. Goddard's got to come back. A.J. Brown had some big-time moments. Devontae. Their offense is really special, and that's why they've won a lot of these games, right? Because it's essentially been shootouts in the second half. Harder to have shootouts with the 49ers, I think, because their defense, they're just not really going to play in a 38-35 type game.
Yeah, the best one-possession win teams over the last several years have been Philadelphia. It caught up with them today. Minnesota last year caught up with them. There was a Cowboy team and a Seahawk team over the last 3 or 4 years, and it caught up with them. You just can't. eventually you can't get outgained like Philly had 4 straight games. Eventually, it just doesn't work that way. And so I kind of look at Philadelphia, and I think they'll play very well. In a weird way, they were best served to get their butt kicked because they'll come against Dallas. They'll play a great game.
Yeah, 100%.
They'll play a great game. But I do think there is a fundamental problem that they can only overcome with ball control offensively, which is their back 4, back 7. Linebackers are weak. Corners aren't great. They have one good safety. The only way to overcome that is with ball control. And that's it. And now they have the components to do that.
I think they also got to be really careful. And in fairness, their players, I mean, Slay's on the volume, high-level guy, Jalen, super high-level guy. Their coach can be really, really yappy, right? And not in a Bill Parcells, like, check the pelts on my wall yappy. It's like kind of annoying. And there's a level of, listen, Kyle Shanahan's going to scream at the refs, but he's not going to give the other team. He's an old school kind of Andy Reid, his dad. Like, it's not about, he doesn't want to get involved in the thing. And I do think their coaching staff, you got Sirianni screaming at people pregame. Listen, that works against the majority of opponents. It's not going to work against the Chiefs. Maybe it works a little bit against Dallas, but it's not going to work against the 49ers. It's more just X's and O's. We're going to hit you in the mouth, and we're going to be relentless. So all that stuff, that kind of typically feeds into Philly. Like, they loved when Dom got tossed, and they feed off that stuff. The Niners they have proven that this core of guys have won so many games on the road. Went into Green Bay and won, went into Dallas and won. Like, they're not going to be intimidated by difficult circuit. They easily could have won a couple years ago against the Rams, right? When Tart dropped the ball. So they go into these environments a lot like some great, like, NBA players, like the Curry group over the years. Like, they're not intimidated. They might need a couple series to kind of gather themselves, but they're going to be okay. So the Eagles, it's going to be a scheme game versus them. Can you out-scheme them? Because all the other shit, like, the Niners aren't going to be fazed by that crap. Can you out-think them? Can you out-call, like Andy Reid, can you out-call plays against whatever their looks are, offensively or defensively? And you saw today it wasn't really a fair fight. Now, like you said, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, a little gas. I think if you told me there was a rematch, I would expect a much better Philly effort. But I do think big picture, do they have, like, their head coach, he's not calling the plays on either side. He's just kind of screaming on the sideline. Like, the 49ers guy is their play caller. Like, it's him versus you. So that's a disadvantage for the Eagles.
Here's the other thing is I'm trying to think of a roster. Hufunga's injury, although painful, they can protect it with a good pass rush. I don't think there's been a roster as good as San Francisco since the Seahawks roster that won a Super Bowl but went to 2 straight. That roster just didn't make – that was such a good roster.
Yeah.
You're not really allowed to do that anymore. Again, Russell was on a rookie deal. The minute he wasn't, the roster wasn't good. Purdy's on a rookie deal. But I'm trying to think of a roster. I mean, I remember that Seattle team was so good that they went and just rented Percy Harvin, almost never used him as a toy. And then they went and got Cliff Averill, said, yeah, we'll bring another pass rusher in. You're like, yeah, that's a luxury of a rookie contract. You can't do that with a veteran quarterback. But I think this roster, I find myself rooting for San Francisco to win because it would be such a shame if this roster didn't at least want, like that Seattle roster, John, it was too damn good not to win a Super Bowl. It was just too good. It was just fundamentally too good. The Ravens roster with Dilfer. There's like 7 Hall of Famers. I grew up with the Steelers in the 70s. There were a couple Raider teams. You're like, yeah, the Cowboys, Jimmy Johnson roster. They need to win a Super Bowl. There's too many good players. I kind of feel like the best roster in the league is San Francisco. I'm thinking about second with the emergence of Bland for the Cowboys at corner and Ferguson, the tight end. Is Dallas the second best roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a chance to prove it this upcoming week because they went toe-to-toe with them and they should have won that game. I think Philly's right there fully healthy, but they're just missing a ton of guys, and they got some guys that aren't coming back. And the Niners, the moment they lost a couple guys, they weren't the same. So this sport, the margins are so thin. I mean, you saw Jalen all of a sudden get cracked. I started thinking, because the game was already over, well, what about next week? What if he can't clear? That'd be a devastating. They're not going into Dallas to win with Mariota. So, yeah. Right. The problem with Dallas is even if they win this upcoming game at home, like how are you going to pick them in a big playoff game I've seen them lose at home to the 49ers a couple years ago. Now, you would say that they're the cohesion with Mike and Dak and Dan Quinn and the group, they've been together longer. But there's an element where, and I picked them this year to start the season to win the division. And clearly they're damn good, right? I mean, to me, Detroit is on the lower tier beside these three teams, right? You know, the Niners, the Eagles, the Cowboys. And then I would put Detroit on another tier kind of by themselves. But it's just, Dak is having a fantastic year, but do you truly trust him? I mean, even that Eagles game, stepping out of bounds, just little things. I mean, these are the little details of you'd be the number 1 seed, or you got to now win this game and then take care of business the rest of the year. They were the team this year that lost a game. Like, how do you lose to Arizona? How do you lose to Arizona? It's a Cowboy home game in Glendale. It's 80-20, your fans. So I like their roster, love their coaching staff, especially on defense. You got to give Mike credit. He's doing a great job. But I just have a hard time. And this is, like you said, with the Niners. Their players have not won a championship level, but they have championship character deep in them. I've seen them in the big moments, from Debo to Kittle to Trent to Fred to Nick to Eric Armstead. Like, they're wired. Like, they might lose, but it's going to be because you beat them, not because they screw up or they're not good enough.
Yeah.
And I don't know about Dallas. They have the talent. And I think the Bland guy's an incredible story. Didn't go to the combine, now setting records of pick sixes, and just they do. For everyone that talks shit about Jerry, right? He's a little bit of a wild card. How good are they as a personnel team? We anoint John Lynch and Howie, like Jerry's every bit their equal. And I know he's not picking evaluating the 5th rounders, but he's technically their GM, so he's empowering people. They build a team that goes toe to toe with these two teams. I know they lost to the 49ers big in the regular season, but they easily could have beat them in the playoffs last year. So, I'm not going to I think Dallas could easily win this week. Hell, I might pick them by the end of the week, but I'm still not going to feel confident because, Colin, here's what's going to happen. If let's say they don't win the division, they're going to destroy the Falcons or the Bucks or whoever the hell wins that worthless division. And we're going to be like, oh, Dallas, Dak just threw 4 touchdowns, and it happened last year, and then they were gone the next round. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do it, get over the hump. I just have a hard time believing until they do. I'm not going to pick them to do it until they do it, and I'll just be wrong.